writing an account of his journey towards the North Pole, a brilliant and egomaniacal description called Farthest North. Fridtjof Nansen reached for a way to attach his expedition to the ancient history of exploration in the far north. He rummaged in his remembered store of tales, and found the old idea of Thule. He used lines from Seneca as the epigraph to the book, creating a symbolic focus for his journey. A time will come in later years when the ocean will unloose the bands of things, when the immeasurable earth will lie open, when seafarers will discover new countries, and Thule will no longer be an extreme point among the islands. A grandiose and barren place, the mountains like vast crumbling sphinxes covered with patch blankets, their folds falling heavily to the valley floor. The glaciers rise into blank blue walls, spilling ice into the sea. Rock and ice mingle in a two-tone freeze, the granite dark against the whiteness. Seals bask on icebergs. The sun casts an orange glow across the sea. There is a broad valley that stretches for miles, and reindeer graze in the far distance. Kittiwakes and guillemots gather on the cliff tops, screeching and crying. The dappled pattern of the mountains emerge above the line of mist, bright against the clouds, their slopes streaked with ice. Unseen and untrodden under their spotless mantle of ice, the rigid polar regions slept the profound sleep of death from the earliest dawn of time. Wrapped in his white shroud, there the mighty giant stretched his clammy ice limbs aboard, and dreamed his age-long dreams. Deep was the silence. Determined to discover, to shade in the blanks on the maps, it had driven them mad, this sense of something out of sight, something they didn't know. Nansen had written, Why did we continually return to the attack, to the land of darkness and cold, the shore of corpses? To what end? Nowhere in truth has knowledge been purchased at a greater cost of privation and suffering, but the spirit of humanity will never rest till every spot of these regions has been trodden, till every enigma has been solved. These explorers would not settle for the fantasy version, the mythical imaginary version, the utopian vision of the lands in the far north. They wanted the real north. Whatever it was, Thule had changed. Thule was something different. It contained imperfections and degradation within its borders. It had become colonized. The story would change and change again. Thule was an ancient fragment, representing thousands of years of discovery in the north. But it was an ancient human fragment, a piece of storytelling. It expressed the ambivalence of the human relationship to nature, the desire for pace, the appreciation of grandeur and beauty, the sense of unease in hostile, uninhabitable nature, the need to make use of nature to survive, the perilous balance between survival and exploitation. It expressed the ambivalence of the human relationship to perfection, a desirable but impossible state, a state glimpsed and occasionally seized for a fleeting moment, but doomed to transience. Thule was ambiguous, available for corruption. They knew the worst. They knew the desperate struggle in the terrible cold. Thule represented imagining and traveling in trying to understand. No longer a land of mystery, shrouded in mist, standing on the edge of a frozen ocean, Thule had become a land of humans' accidental monuments. The governor reigns benevolent over everybody. The governor threw edicts and boundaries across the land, keeping everything plain and empty. Much of the land was cordoned off, kept clear. The governor was an autocrat with a fat rule book. The rocks are tagged with rules. The edicts are so strict that Thule became a kind of invented reality, something slightly odd at the edges, enforcing a state of innocence. The rules are pasted on the walls. Do not disturb the animals. Do not pick the flowers. Do not damage or remove cultural monuments. All traces of human activity are cultural monuments. Remember, you are a guest. The brooding over it all, there is a bust of Lenin, with a sign behind his head, saying, Arctic coal. He was the most northerly Lenin, trapped in communist era, trapped in communist colors, trapped in communist functionalism, fading away in the far north. In this land trapped in the past, Lenin was still presiding. One devastated brick facade had its date written above the door, 1996, the year time stopped. A poem written out large saying, so, wherever you now travel, on the threshold of any spring, you will think of Arctic ways, you will dream the Arctic dream. Paying homage to the dead, the victims of mining disaster, of plane crashes, of dust explosions, of abandoned towns, it created a strange atmosphere, dreaming the Arctic dream. There were still mines on the island, Norwegian and Russian. The resident miners seemed to occupy a blank spot on the governor's vision, like relics from earlier centuries. Old-fashioned exploitation, armies of pragmatists, hardly interested in the old dreams, taking what they could from the islands. It was the cleanest coal in the world, they said. Cableways stretch every which way across the land, dangling buckets of coal, slowly marching towards the coast. There was also a team of prophets inhabiting the island, casting their cards at the future. They offered predictions of the coming Earth, the warmed Earth. They were trying to lasso the indeterminacy of the future, drag it towards the present. They were reluctant prophets, everything laced with uncertainty. They could spin a riddle, offer up an augury, as long as no one asked to stamp it as definite, but in recent years there had been bad tidings. It was a tidy story, a tidy paradox. It had a beginning, the coal companies, a middle, the prophets, an end, the coming Earth, an uncertain future. Despite the blazing of the mines, the melting of the ice was a nightmare the island was trying not to fall asleep into. I thought of Manson's ship, drifting towards the infinite shadow of the Arctic, sailing towards untouched ice plains. His journey prophetically outlined the future problems the Arctic would be confronted by. In some stories, Thule lay between the Earth and the world of gods, somewhere beyond the reach of mortals. Past and future lurked at the edges of the archipelago. When all the formerly mysterious places were mapped, the future seemed to me the blanks on the map must have been to explorers. The pragmatic colony on Thule, the reality of Svalbard, was a place where fantasy exists alongside nervous prophecy. No one was bellowing certainty from the rocks. The rumbling has only been heard in the distance. I understood that it was inevitable that as the lands of the north became part of human history, they would lose the plainness of perfection, the sheen of purity. The yearning to return to a blank space, a space allowing endless fantasy, was utopian and impossible. It was regressive. It sought to forget the desperate struggle of the explorers. Thule was an ancient fragment. The question was how far we wanted to go, how much we wanted to transform the ancient tracts of ice. Humans had always had the power to transform the scenery by acts of imagination, to make symbolism of a barren rock, or a mystery of a sluggish sea. Humans had always hunted the remote north. The frozen sea may one day be nothing more than a fairy tale, told from a vanished world.